I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here on Black Power Media, BPM. I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be back with you. I'm actually starting just a little bit early um, for no apparent reason. Got a lot to get to. Actually got a lot to get to, so maybe I'm just a little anxious. But I also wanted to just be able to take a couple of minutes to deal with a few housekeeping things, greet folks as they're coming in, encourage you all to right off the jump, go tell other people, other folks to get in here. Um, like Math Hoffa says, get in here and wipe your feet on the rug by liking, hitting the like button. Um, peace, peace, peace. Greetings, greetings. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm just going to get. There's a number of things to get to, and I want to just right off the break, something I'm going to be constantly coming back to this morning as we build towards sort of what for me at least is a crescendo. Uh, Today you can call me Freddie Foreshadowing. Because in my mind, at least, I've put together a discussion, and we will have a guest later on to talk about. We are going to be hearing from uh, a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party about his work on Kwame Nkrumah. Michael Williams is going to join us in the next hour. And maybe talk about his personal reflections on knowing Kwame Ture as well. But anyway, but in my mind, I have this idea that everything that I've put together for this morning is again working towards a crescendo that ultimately concludes with the Black Liberation Army and class struggle. But so again, everything, as I said, everything so far, you can call again. This is all going to be foreshadowing. Call me Freddie Foreshadowing. Definitely just automatically click the like, share, subscribe, click the bell, and I'd even encourage again that folks reach out and invite people to jump in here now if they can live. And those of you who are seeing or hearing this later on all of your favorite podcast outlets, welcome and greetings to you as well. Please do again, if you have any experience as a student, staff member, parent, faculty, admin, with HBCUs, please go to imixwhatilike.org and jump into the project I have still ongoing, long form project, longitudinal study, as some might say. And of course, check out our new Discord. All of it is in the show notes as well. Continue the discussions, etc., so forth. So just a couple things very quickly. I'm not going to. Maybe we can come back to some of this later, but just off the top, I did not watch the Super Bowl other than the halftime show, and it was cool. It was all right. It was cool. Dre definitely had some bangers. My head was nodding a little bit. But I had to remind, because I heard the announcer say that this was going to be the best ever halftime show, or it was the best ever halftime show. And so I just had to, do what I could to remind people that that could not ever be the case, because for whatever value these things have, if any at all, um, if there is going to be an ordering of best ever halftime performances, there's really only one, and it just all stops after Prince. It is Prince. There is no even close second. There is no, and it's not up for debate. And I'm not arguing. I don't even care. And if you disagree, bye. This is, of all the things, of all the positions I have in anything, uh, political or otherwise, if you don't agree on this one, we just can't be friends. We can't be comrades. It's a wrap. I'll disagree. We could work together on any number of other things. But if you're not down, if you at all rank them, I mean, if you just stay out of the whole thing, that's fine. But if you rank them and Prince is not a distant number one, then we're not friends. We just can't. We just not. I went back and watched it, Prince's performance. And I don't even know if people even understood. Last year, I think I shared, like, somebody did a really good Twitter thing on it. Like, I don't even know if people understand what Prince was doing. When he did, for instance, when he went seamlessly from his own music to covering other, when he did The Best of You, I think that's the Foo Fighters song, that was him letting them know that I heard you do my song without permission and not do it well. And I'm just letting you know that whenever I want, I can get up here in the rain and do your song better than you could ever do it. And then there's even a shot where he looks at the camera and he even just kind of gives a little look like, you didn't know? You didn't know? So I just want to just take a second to clarify that there is no in the rain, in the rain. So I'm not mad at you. So James, I'm not mad at you. I'm not advocating. I haven't watched either. I didn't watch any. I have totally left the sport, almost all sports actually at this point, which is on some level sad. I feel a little sad about it, but I just can't politically and otherwise. Just I'm not down anymore. So I'm cool if that's Thank you, Warren. I mean, for real, like. Oh, so is this Roz? Are you saying bye? Because last night was the best. Then bye. There is no way. There's no way. You had first of all, oh, and I forgot the sister's channel. I just found this sister's channel on YouTube, but she raised the question that with Snoop just now taking over Death Row Records, why wouldn't they go back and take care of and reintroduce Lady of Rage, who's, if people know the history, when she was supposed to blow it like the timing that, like, they all did her dirty and shelved her, and she never got to the level she should have gotten to, because of the timing of the release of the albums and the Death Row collapse and everybody, Dre and Snoop and them, leaving. So now that he's back, they should have hooked her up. They should have had her out there. But even with Mary, even with whatever people think about Eminem, even with 50, even with whoever you bring out there, with all the dancers, it was cute, and all the sets. Go back and watch Prince. It's not even close. So yeah, bye. It's not even close. The game was rigged. They're probably all rigged. By the way, I've been looking into some of that too. Brian Truhoy, I think is his name, has written several books on it. I think I might have mentioned this on here already. But did you so his arguments about why all these professional sports are rigged include one thing that is very compelling to me, which is that legally speaking, the law prohibits rigging games that are of intellectual design or background, like Jeopardy or historically those quiz shows and all of that stuff. The movie Quiz Show is actually somewhat historically accurate on this, and a very good movie. But his argument is that that because professional sports fall into the category of entertainment, like WWE and all of that, that it is legal for them to control the outcome of the game. And that he even goes into detail, like when you buy a ticket to the game, you're all they have to do is put on an exhibition of a football game. As long as you go and they don't play baseball or basketball or cards, they've satisfied the legal responsibility of you buying the ticket to the game. What is this? Oh, no, I'll address this in a second. This is very easy. So anyway, so that it is legal, it would be legal for them, and a good business decision since they all revenue share anyway. So anyway, I have no doubt of that. Um, how, any real hip hop head who does not understand and appreciate the role and history of Black music beyond hip hop, and the role that Prince has played in music and inspiring and would think that an all-star Death Row / Mary performance somehow is better than Prince just because it's hip hop. That's not hip hop. That's not hip hop. So there's no contradiction here. There's no hypocrisy here. In the same way that were we to get in his prime a full James Brown and the JBs show, I would have taken that over almost all of the hip hop performance that I grew up on that would have sampled him. So let's not, Now I like this here. If Ray, now that makes sense. If Rage is doing work with Fred Jr., that makes sense. Anyway, that's trash, and you know it. Nah, man. Prince. As the late Charlie Murphy said, and I used to play, Prince is the shit. Anyway, all right. Oh yeah, okay. I didn't know she was working with him, no. But that's like not regularly. I didn't know that that was a regular thing. So that's what's up, and that would explain why Lady of Rage would not have been there on the Super Bowl. Plus, you all know there's only one Black woman revolutionary that can be allowed to perform at the Super Bowl, and that's Beyonce. So, all right, all right. Another quick thing that I wanted to get to, and we may come back to. So if folks, so I want to encourage people to become members and Patreon supporters, and we've been trying to increase our deliveries to that group. So one just went public the other day, something that came out a couple weeks ago for members and Patreon supporters. Another attempt on my part to argue for the after party concept. So please check that out and comment and critique, etc. There's another one that is still only for Patreon members and YouTube members that I did about Richard Wolff and the Bitcoin Socialist, and saying that even if we can't get them on here, their work will be of value. We'll make value of it. So please go check that out. But there's sort of an update on that. For those who have seen it, this will make a little more sense. Those who have not, it may still make it up. But two things related to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I'm not doing a lot on it today. Don't flip, please, everybody who don't like that when I do that. But it is coming back again, though. We are going to have to address it, though. But and tomorrow night, I'm doing something with Black Men Build. So shout out to them. They're having a panel on crypto, something. So I'll be supporting that, working with them on that. But so two things. One, I saw a recent appearance by Richard Wolff, again on his Democracy at Work channel. He did an interview. He was in, or I think it was on someone else's platform. Anyway, he was interviewed by someone apparently willing to go on their show to talk about crypto. But anyway, and the the short of it is, honestly, maybe he doesn't want to come on and talk about it because this is maybe one area he isn't really, on firm ground. Because a lot of his response when he was asked twice by the interviewer about what's going on with Bitcoin and crypto, his response was important, but went to sort of macro level issues. Um, um, and essentially saying that, essentially saying that people are in crisis, people are desperate, people are confused, people are reaching out for anything that can be a sign of hope, and they're fed up with the current the existing system. But instead of destroying capitalism, they're trying to replace it with something that largely follows that same logic. So of course I agree with that, but he didn't really get into a lot of detail. So I was like a little bit like, well, maybe, maybe he should come on so we can, anyway. So that was one thing, but the other thing was that Michael Burry, who people might know from the film The Big Short, played by Christian Bale as the guy who made hundreds of millions of dollars predicting the collapse of the housing market. People have been following what he's been saying over the last year or so, through, doesn't do a lot of interviews, but through a Twitter account and some other spaces. And basically he's been saying everything is a bubble right now. Everything is a speculative bubble, including crypto. And so and he said, just in general, we're at the height of speculation, and there's going to be a massive drop again. So just FYI that it's not, it's not good. Investing in crypto is like the equivalent musically of arguing that a death row Super Bowl show is better than Prince. You're gonna lose and you're gonna go broke. Anyway. All right. Let's get into some. Let me move on to a little more of the serious business of the day, and give a quick partition here and come right back and start talking about some political prisoner stuff. Right.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
All right, everybody. So although we do want to have fun, there is some serious stuff going on. And, there's this past week, there was the People's Forum in New York. Which I've passed through once or twice. I was on a panel once with Charles Pender Hughes and the late Rod Bush. And I've passed through there. One thing I noticed before we get to what I really wanted to bring up here, this is something I just was noticing. And so, for instance, sometimes I notice that, first of all, BPM, we're approaching 14,000 subscribers. So please get some folks to jump in, and let's go ahead and hit that 14,000 pretty soon, and keep increasing what we're doing here. But sometimes I notice that when our videos go up, we don't, ideally I would think that every one of the 13,700 plus subscribers to the channel would watch all of our videos, so that all of our videos would have minimums of 10,000+ views. We don't do that, so I don't know exactly what the science says about that. But I do tend to think, as I peruse these YouTube streets, that when I see channels that have huge subscriber numbers but not huge numbers on their video plays, I'm always wondering what's going on there. And the converse is also true. There are a few people with low subscriber numbers but whose videos seem to generate tens of thousands of views beyond how many subscribers they have. So I don't know exactly, so I know people can rig some of this and mess with the numbers and buy things and whatever. So but in some things are just more appealing to. But one thing I noticed here is that the People's Forum has 24.6 thousand subscribers. But if you go through the video offerings, rarely do they hit numbers that we even hit here on BPM for ours, unless there is some sort of celebrity activist involved. So I was wondering, and again, I tend not to cuss too much on these programs, but forgive me here. But I just wondered, I made a note here, is the white left, are the People's Forum, that I maybe incorrectly defined as mostly the white left, are they star fuckers? Is that what's going on here? Because other than like this report back from Eugene Puryear and what's the sister's name? She's been on with us a number of times too. And Hermela Argawi, forgive me from it, about Ethiopia, which has 91,000 views. That's you know, that's impressive actually. Most of these have a couple hundred, maybe 1,000. Until we get down here, you know, Robin Kelly gets 5,000. That's even low for Robin Kelly, I would think. Something on Assange only has 1.9 thousand. I don't know, maybe I'm getting too caught up in these YouTube algorithms. There was something here with Angela Davis that had big numbers right here, 11,000 and 34,000. So I mean, I think that's to be expected, but I mean, even here, oh, wow, I just went blank on her name. You all know her name. Why am I blanking on her name? I don't actually mean to be disrespectful here. I just blanked on her name. But even this only has a couple hundred views. So I'm just like, is the left star fucking? Are you really? Is that what's going on here? Anyway, that was just one thing. I was just curious. But the real point, but what they did do is something that I do want to have us look at a little bit, because they did have a panel here the other day that includes some of admittedly my own and I think our collectively favorite people. But they did a panel on George Jackson political prisoners that featured, among others, Albert Woodfox and Dr. Joy James. And I just want to play a little bit of what they had to say, because again, as I want to continue to remind, you know, we are, in my mind at least, and I hope it works out, this is all foreshadowing. Call me Freddie foreshadowing this morning. But we do always like to cover what's going on with political prisoners here. And when they are invited to speak, you know what, and I have to admit, folks, I have to admit, and I apologize to the universe for this, and to Brother Albert, I have not read his book Solitary that apparently came out in 2016. We have a great interview with him and Laura Whitehorn at imixwhatilike.org. I don't know if I put that in the show notes when he first got released, but yeah, anyway, so let me play a little bit of this where he's talking about well, you'll hear what he has to say, at least a clip of this. I put the whole thing in the show notes so you can follow up and get all of this on your own. But I just, you know, obviously want to play a little bit of this as we foreshadow to our grand crescendo later on in the program.
To the Angola, and I remember sitting down with Scott talking, and I'm like, what do I do now? You know, because I was still very confused about.
By the way, he's talking about he's already sort of laid out some of his background about, you know, his youth involvement in petty crime, getting arrested, escaping. I mean, there's a lot of fascinating stuff in this. So I don't want to, you know, I want to encourage. I'm just playing a little excerpt from this where he's talking about Angola and George Jackson a little bit. But anyway, so that's just this is where we're picking up.
About everything, but there was something in me, something I realized in later years that had been instilled in me by my mom. And he's, you know, he just said to me, he said, brother, you're a Panther now. You expect to fight for the people, to defend the people, to fight against, you know, inhumane conditions when you get to Angola. You know, at that time, Angola had been designated the bloodiest prison in America. Almost every day, someone was being stabbed or killed or by either other prisoners, by security people. You know, they had a brutal system called inmate guards, in which inmates were given weapons to guard other inmates. And the only requirement was you had to have a life sentence, because that way the turnover wouldn't be great, you know. And so a guy could come into prison today with a life sentence, and within 30 days, he could be standing on a guard line or a guard tower with a weapon. That was the only training, and believe me, these men became even more brutal than the security people there. At that time, they used to call them free man, But I sat down with Scott and I said, well, what do I do? And he gave me my instructions, be a Panther wherever you go, uphold the principles and the values of the party. And so when I went to Angola, that's what I did. But of course, it was difficult because I had established a reputation in the crime life. So a lot of guys thought I was, as they say, I was kicking game. It was a way to get over. But as time went on and my dedication stuff, and more, people like, man, what done happened to you? And I would try to explain and as best possible that I found something. I always use the term that when I was growing up, the voice of the street was louder than my mom's voice, and believe me, she fought valiantly to try and save me, from what was at that time almost a rite of passage for a black male to go to prison, and eventually the voice of the party became louder than the voice of the street. And I was, finally able to make that transition from petty criminal to social activist revolutionary. And unfortunately, most of it occurred in a 6x9 cell in 1972. Myself and Harmon and two other guys were framed for the murder of a prison guard. Who had been stabbed to death, and I went in solitary April 18th, 1972, and I didn't walk out of solitary till my birthday, February 19th, 2016, after 44 years and 10 months of solitary, But in the process of that, there was certain required reading of party members. And I remember reading in Solidarity Brothers, and George made such a powerful impact because he taught me that, my mom used to always tell me that change is 100% desire and 10% doing. And I never understood that until I read George. I read George writing, and I was so impressed by what he had to say. And he helped me tremendously to make that transition, from petty criminal to social activist, revolutionary. And so, I spent the next 44 years and stuff, living by things I learned from him. He actually taught me how to survive solitary. And one of the reasons was, he taught me about discipline. He taught me about dedication. He taught me about loyalty, things, but it's crazy. Like when I was going through this period, I kept saying to myself, this voice in my head kept saying, I done heard this before. I done read this before, and eventually I reached a point in my life where I'm like, my mom used to tell me this, or my mom used to try to tell me this. And, I could have kicked myself for, not truly seeing, and as I've said before, imagine, my imagination when I realized that my mom was the first Harriet Tubman that I knew personally,
I love that as a compliment to his mother, the first Harriet Tubman that he knew. Anyway, so I just wanted to play that little bit of a clip and I from him. I'm going to come back to more in just a minute, but I wanted to at least play that little bit of a clip. Really appreciate. I mean, I can't even imagine what the hell that he had been put through. But and yeah, Josh, thank you. That was Kianga Yamada Taylor. I couldn't think of her name. And so I see some folks are saying, so I might be wrong on the People's Forum. I've only passed through there a couple times, so I might, so Darren, to your point, I just was looking at the number. I don't know. I mean, 24,000 subscribers. I feel like they should have a lot more views on those videos. I'm wondering what that was all about. I could be all entirely wrong about that, but and yeah. So as we covered here before, there was a good amount of crypto advertising, I'm sure, during the Super Bowl. I only actually saw one of the ads with Larry David, which was actually, I thought, well done and funny, but entirely, of course, inaccurate historically or in terms of contemporary the situation contemporarily with in the moment with crypto. But as we've covered here, that this Super Bowl there was being equated by the ad community, the advertising community, as having more ads in this Super Bowl, or as many ads in this Super Bowl, or the equivalent amount of ads in this Super Bowl. I think it's more than what were had in the early 90s, or is it the 2000 Super Bowl? I can't remember, but the 2000, somewhere in the early 2000s with the .com folks. And the point that I was making was we saw what happened with the .com. So like all that advertising does not mean it's a sustainable model. It does not mean everything being advertised is sustainable. So when Larry David's commercial is saying, basically making fun of all, people who would have historically stood against innovative technology and change, at one point he's looking at somebody invents the toilet and he's saying, no, we don't need the toilet. We can continue going outside like, we're supposed to. Basically saying who would not want a toilet. So therefore, who would not want to, get involved with crypto? It's nonsense. But, as we've explained here, just as a quick, for instance, the toilet has a legit function and a product and is itself a product, unlike crypto. Anyway, okay, so yeah, we talked about this a little bit in a previous show too. And the only thing I didn't follow up on is that one line that I didn't see anyone else report on, and I should have followed up on, that was reported, was in one article, was that OBJ had signed this contract in a deal with, I forgot the name of it, but it wasn't Coinbase, but one of the major crypto exchanges. So I kept wanting to hold out for that, while the value of his contract would have been cut almost in half with the devalue of Bitcoin, there might have been some sort of promotional relationship with that exchange that covers him from losing any significant amount of money. As others have pointed out, the $750,000 that he signed for, even if he lost a good amount of it, overall wouldn't hurt his income, because he's made so much money, has so many other endorsements, etc. I don't know. Then he got I think he got taken out the game last night with an injury, so I don't know what that means either. But there you go. That's it, Emma. Yep. Boom. All right. So again, shout out to Albert Woodfox. I cannot imagine that the horrors of his experience. It's very good to see him. It's just great to see him being at these events. And anyway, so I want to play one other clip from that, from just one of my favorite people, period. Never mind her work. And again, you know, not enough academics behave off air the way this one does. So to hear from her is always a delight. And I want to play at least a clip from Dr. Joy James that speaks to, again, something, you know, important to me in particular, but also as I'm building today to some foreshadowing. So let's pick up with her. I can't remember the exact question she was starting with, but anyway, it'll be, you know, the point will be made evident.
Who you loved and people who loved you. Like, we read reality through all these different levels, right? From the spirit, from the material, from the desire. And so it's just the imprint that led me to ask, who is this? And then to be told. And then this becomes the cover of an anthology, which actually is my favorite of all the, I think I've done 4 or 5, you know, anthologies on incarceration, but imprisoned intellectuals. So that photo of George is on the cover of the book. And his spirit, his tenacity, his love, his rebellion, his strategies, his theory, his fearlessness, and also his militaristic presentation, right, is part of the learning cycle. And, you know, to go back to what Bernard was saying, I think it's difficult in the academy, where that's where I'm based, right? That's, quote, my industry. It's difficult to have that much courage, even if it's just about the text, like I don't even have the words for it. You have the words for it, right? So I'm gonna try. To sit in a classroom and to be able to read and not be a consumer, but to decide to be an ally, right? An ally to work against the 13th Amendment, against the prison industry as a form of captivity, enslavement, against anti-Blackness, against capitalism, against imperialism. And George's writings, your writings, bring us very close to that reality that we have to grapple with without having to be in a zone of complete terror and predatory structure that we pay for with our tax dollars, right? So there's a few things I want to say about I was really struck about what you said, Robert, when you were quoting George, that we all have to come together. But I also see these obstacles. Some of them are shaped by class. Some of them are shaped by leadership that's more performative than tied to what you've been describing. And some of it's shaped by the academy itself, because academia, as much as we want to be allies, it's also structured for something else. I mean, it's structured for accumulation of stories and narratives, right? And so I appreciate this panel here because it's showing different ways of not how to be someone who accumulates, but also someone who can be humbled by the larger stories and the larger commitments. So the things that I want to close with, because I want to keep it really short, is to talk about some of the community intellectuals that I've met recently. So one is Kamasi, who was speaking with Kalonji on Black Power Radio, and Kamasi did time with George Jackson. And so this interview happened this week. And if you want to go to Black Power Radio BPM, you'll find this like brilliant hour-long discussion about someone who worked with George and who had gone, as George had, from different prisons to different prisons because their organizing was seen as a threat. And also how people attempted to, quote, follow the rules, right? But to know that all the rules are in opposition to freedom and to dignity and honor. So at some point, the rules become, there's no logic to them other than the logic to break people, right? And to dismember Black agency and the agency of all people around human rights, around solidarity, and around freedom. So there are other people that I've learned from, and I'm thinking of Jericho. Bernard mentioned that I'd referenced John Edgar Wideman in terms of the neo-slave narratives as a concept. But actually, if I remember correctly, because the writings have happened over like the last 20 years or so in terms of the anthologies, that writing would have been from John Edgar Wideman, would have come from his introduction to Mumia Abu-Jamal's Life from Death Row, right? And so again, there's a connection with the leadership, the intellectualism of the captive, right? But there also has to be a willingness to engage in the politics that both of you are representing, like the legal strategy, the political strategy, and just the determination to stay true to a particular political ethic. So when I think of John Edgar Wideman's writings, right? And I learned from writing, but it's really like a unit like Jericho, which works with political prisoners, that meeting some people, writing to them when they're incarcerated, anthologizing them, interacting as best I can from, the zone that I'm in, which is not necessarily a terror zone, but it's a very corporate zone, right? It's that dynamic intellectualism which has introduced me to Leonard Peltier, who now has COVID, Sundiata Okoli, Veranza Bowers, Ed Poindexter, Reverend Joy Powell, the Virgin Island Five, and others, right? There's more people than I can name here. So there's a couple of things I want to say in closing. I'm really trying to figure out, so I'd be helpful for any assistance that you can offer. How can the Academy be more relevant in the struggle? And how is it that we as academics can stand down in terms of overly influencing what leadership looks like when we don't occupy these zones of extreme vulnerability and predatory behavior from the state? The other thing that I'm trying to figure out in dialogue with others is this concept of slavery that is debated when we talk about abolitionism. So when I think of Max Parthas or Marshall Eddie Conway interviewing him for the Real News Network a couple years ago about the abolition of the 13th Amendment, right? So they're doing a state-by-state referendum because the 13th Amendment, if you've been duly, that's air quotes, convicted of a crime, involuntary servitude or the slavery that you've been both talking about, right, is an imprint, that tracks you and also attempts to break you. But we have no consensus on the outside what this slavery is, how to define it, and how to mobilize against it. So there are these debates, when Max speaks, when I hear him speak, he's looking for the abolition of the 13th Amendment. Other people are looking for the abolition of the prison industrial complex. There are these different phrases, and I agree, we all need to come together, but I'm not sure we've built the bridges. The last thing I would say when I'm thinking of the strike at Rikers right now, even though people have said that it's stopped, but given the conditions of Rikers, I doubt that it has. It seems to me it's been easier for us to see the opposition and predatory formations if they come in the guise of white politicians or white prison guards. But as I've said on other platforms, and I've been told to wait and see how it pans out, but whatever. We have in New York City a Black mayor who used to be in NYPD, and we have a Black police commissioner who's a Black woman. So there are ways in which Black feminism gets shaped, like, oh, if we just get a Black woman as vice president or Black woman at X, Y, and Z, somehow things are going to be proactively better in terms of dealing with predatory capitalism, with exploitation in the prisons. And I'm curious about how we could navigate that desire to see Black leadership within structures of power and to think that's a pathway towards freedom and equity. And if we could demystify that desire, like we have this big desire around Obama and others, right? What would solidarity look like? And what would it mean to take leadership, not just the stories, but leadership from those who've spent years, decades struggling, particularly in the most difficult arenas, meaning prisons, ICE camps, et cetera, as we consider what are the possibilities for freedom, particularly, this is my read of it, as neo-fascism went from the underground to the above ground. So again, my deep appreciation for your wisdom.
So there's a lot that I mean, even in those little clips, there's a lot from both of them. And for now, I would only want to say, and hopefully sooner than later, I can develop some better thoughts on this and discuss this with Professor James. But when she asks, how can the academy become more relevant to the struggle? I have to say, after my 20 years of experience, as limited as they've been, and maybe hampered by my particular experience, I think that question, I think we have collectively mythologized academia too much. And I think we should stop looking at those of us within academia as being any different from any other segment of the community or the workforce. So on the one hand, I get it. And again, I mean, I get it that there are class differences, that there is a difference between my experience as an academic and someone else's somewhere else within the class structure or within the economy, the workforce. There are, in some cases, cavernous differences. So I don't want to, in my oversimplification, deny that. However, the extent to which we as academics have an ability to impact the struggle, impact our institutions, impact our surrounding communities, I think is wildly overestimated. Not only because many of us within the academic world are politically more conservative or useless or, you know, just hostile to radical change, which does of course exist, but just the structures and the place itself. I mean, it's again, why wouldn't we be expecting more from postal workers, trash collectors, couriers, truck drivers, grocery store clerks, Uber drivers? In other words, just like we, I think, have mythologized this idea of professional athletes and celebrities, and we keep saying, well, if we could just get a few of them to get involved, blah, 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 blah. And similar, even sort of to the question I was asking earlier about the left forum and star fucking. There is, to the extent I think we do too much in emphasizing the role of celebrities and the handful of even within the movement, so-called, and we say, well, if we could get them here, we'll get the audience. If we could get that person here, we'll get the audience. And in some ways it plays out. Maybe that's right. Looking at those view counts, I don't know. But it also, well, actually, I didn't even think of it this way. It also encourages the same kind of limitations put on celebrities in the broader society in terms of what they could be expected to do. Because in other words, to get to the point of being a celebrity, you have to conform to a broader, you have to appeal to a broader audience, which often can be equated to becoming more conservative and reactionary. Doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be, given that the world's majority are women, working people, and so-called people of color. But it does tend to be that way because the people who allow for celebrity to occur, who own the means of mental production, so to speak, are themselves conservative, reactionary. So anyway, I'm just, my bad. I'll keep working through this, but I think that and I'll go through the comments. I will. Oof, it's scary, but I'll go check them. But anyway, that's just something I've been thinking for years. I think that there's a mythology around HBCUs. This is why I keep asking people to participate in this project. And the response is, wait, I mean, one day when the project comes out, I don't know when it's going to be. It's going to be a while, but when it comes out, I think a lot of people will be surprised at the stories that anyway. So, but academia in general, I think there's a mythology around what it could be expected to do, or what those of us within it can be expected to do. We don't, anyway. So, now what can we do? To Dr. James's point, though, I think those of us there do need to be thinking more about how we can be of better use to the struggle. But, yeah, anyway, I do tend to think that there's a mythologizing about what is possible. So, okay, so we have about 10 minutes before our guest is going to get here, but I want to continue on with this theme of political prisoners just a little bit more, because there was some and again, I want to encourage everybody to go to the Freedom Archives and get the prisoner newsletter, where there was news in recent releases around Kamal Siddiqui and his 69th birthday, and upcoming news around Mutulu Shakur. And I did put in the show notes one of my favorite discussions with Dhoruba bin Wahad from some years ago around the history of Kamal Siddiqui. It's I mean, I love all of the discussions we've had with Dhoruba, but I think that might be my favorite, or one of them. I mean, it's up there at least. I don't know. It's up there. But yeah. So anyway, but there's a call for, I'm trying to get the link, but this would be my one criticism of the political prisoner newsletter, or the prisoner newsletter. I don't think that the links that they send out in the emails, I mean, I think that I think it could be better organized. It's my bad. I mean, it's my fault. But so let me just share this here, because we want to encourage all this, because the information they send is fantastic. I mean, it really does help keep up to date. Again, the freedomarchives.org prisoner newsletter, or freedomarchives.org, and then look for the prisoner newsletter there. But there's an invitation to send 69 cards and letters for Kamal Siddiqui's 69th birthday. I don't think I put the link in the show notes. I'll make sure it gets there, so that people can follow up on this and send some support. Kamal Siddiqui, long story short, of course, for those, if anyone is not aware, I'm sure the chat is making it well known. He was the partner of Assata Shakur, the father of their child, and at least one child, not one daughter. Forgive me if I'm, my memory is garbage, but he is only imprisoned now because he would not give up any information on the whereabouts of Assata, and that's ridiculous. And let me just I mean, it's ridiculous. That's not the right word. That's insufficient. It's infuriating. It's abusive. It demands response. It's another example of why I'm constantly, usually just in class, I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but I'm constantly asked my opinion on where we are, the state of things. And I keep saying, as long as people like Siddiqui and other people are politically imprisoned, there has been no adequate change or thing that we could say is progress for sure. Again, even when I'm not doing it on purpose, that it is foreshadowing. Because yeah, it's just insufficient. All of our responses are insufficient. It's just, so anyway, there's been nothing. if these folks are still politically in prison, there can be nothing. Well, we can't consider this to have been change. Yeah, yeah. I mean, right. Thank you for any of this context. Yeah. And then right, he refused. He refused that. And you know, it's not only insane for it's actually not insane politically. So again, I would only disagree with this to say that it's politically logical, to the point that even Dr. James was making about the logic of all of this. It is perfectly logical that the US would imprison him. It is perfectly logical that those who would not just not conform, but be seen as supporting the most threatening radical movements, it is logical that he would be imprisoned. I think it's even on some levels logical from the standpoint of understanding oppression, how we've responded, even in our inadequacy. Not to justify it, but similarly, it's logical when there are histories, or when you know, it is logical. There are histories and examples that are seen as scary or threatening that are themselves logical also in their responses. So, you know, but anyway, so there was the other story that I just wanted that came out recently from Prisoner News, is it regards some upcoming events surrounding Mutulu Shakur, and there's an upcoming, I believe, nope, it was yesterday, so that's my bad, we missed that. Sorry about that. There was a webinar regarding Mutulu Shakur that was yesterday. My bad. Anyway, let me see if there was another flyer of some kind attached. There was not, but anyway, please continue to support Mutulu Shakur. There are not plenty. There are other outlets, Jericho Movement, Prison Radio, that are covering. This was saying that there will be more updates on him coming soon, and this was encouraging people to support Watching Dope is Death, which of course Jackie hosted the show. Right, Jackie hosted the show Saturday. The viewing of the screening was a Saturday night, so go check that out. It was past my bedtime, admittedly, so I wasn't able to see it live. But yeah, no doubt. Unless the logic is white supremacy and imperialism, in which case this country is perfectly logical. It is a logical extension of all of that. So, all right. So, not that he hasn't gotten here yet, but when our next guest gets here in just a moment, it's not that his presence is some sort of detour, or interruption, so to speak. It's another tributary or avenue we're going to take, all in the theme that I'm building to this morning. But it's always good to be able to hear from folks from the AAPRP and those who have had direct experience with Kwame Ture, and who have written about Kwame Nkrumah. So we'll talk with him now. So before he gets here, there's a couple of other things. One thing I just wanted to mention, I will bring up just very quickly. Maybe we can come back to it another time. You know, I saw the video about Dave Chappelle saying he would remove his funding from Yellow Springs if his investments, if they go forward with this housing development that is being reported as him standing against low income housing being. I know a lot of you have seen it, and for whatever I know, we don't all agree on Chappelle lately. But in this case, I did do some research. I did look into it a little bit. I posted something on Instagram that I hate to say. I'll say this much. I'm not a fan of Ture per se. This goes back years, you know, for a number of different reasons that are really they're really unimportant. But to his credit, he did follow up on this story, and I think was largely right, because I followed up on it beyond even this, and I feel confident in confirming that what Ture had reported here is largely correct. That, as he said, he did some research into it. A developer with no ties to the area has bought a large plot, 50 acres, and they plan to build 140 very expensive homes. The developer carved out a small 1.75 acre affordable housing piece as a way of mollifying Yellow Springs people. The affordable housing plan is the developer is offering 1.575 acres out of the 50. But it's not the developer that would build the affordable housing at some point. It's someone else that would be brought in to do it at some point in the future. So what I also, so Chappelle wasn't standing against low income housing. He was standing against an outside, and there's a lot of Obreri is the developer. And I actually, if folks want, I'll put the link in the show notes. This guy Vaush, this popular YouTuber, white dude, who I'm not claiming I'm a fan of in any sort of way, but he did this. I watched him do his whole live deep dive into this, and the research seems to bear this out pretty clearly. That Dave, the long story short was that the low income housing would not likely ever really be built. That this was about suburban sprawl and, you know, putting cookie cutter housing into, you know, to this community, upsetting not only Dave but other people's investments in terms of what they've invested in the town. You know, with you know, businesses and bars or whatever they had like I get it, like you have a vision of what you want your community to look like, and then someone else comes in and wants to impose some cookie cutter suburban sprawl on it, and then to mollify people, as it was said here, by claiming we're going to put a little set aside for low income housing that someone else will build at some point. We promise you later, after we build our big houses, we're going to hire someone else to come in and build the low income house. Like, that's what they were really responding to, and it's a lot deeper than that. So I think that what others have concluded is true, that this was a hit job, probably led and inspired by, and I get it, Josh, Vaush is a white supremacist. I get it. Well, you're saying that. I don't know if he's, I don't know. I get it. He's not a good dude, but I watched. My point is, I'm not vouching for Vaush, Josh, or anybody else. I'm not vouching for Vaush. And in fact, I don't like some of the things I've heard him say. My point simply is, I watched him I did watch the whole thing, an hour plus video, and the methodology was sound. I think the research was sound. It suggests that Ture here is correct. So all of these sources are whack. I'm not, you know, CNN, the Post, Vaush. Okay, I'm just saying that in this instance, the methodology seems sound and the research seems sound, and it does seem to make sense that Dave was set up, because there were other videos where you see him talking to the board or whatever, where he's laying this out more clearly. And it wasn't that he was trying to block low income housing per se. It was that he was trying to stop outside developers from coming in and messing up his community. And I get that. Now, what I also do agree, now Vaush said this, and I agree with him on this. The problem is that we have in this society a situation where wealthy people like Dave have an inordinate influence over the democratic process. Now, that I would agree with, that we shouldn't have people, even when they're right. It shouldn't be a situation where you are able to be heard at levels of influence beyond everybody else simply because you're a multimillionaire. That part, I think, is also something that should have to be addressed in an improved society. But I do think in this instance, Dave is suffering some bad reporting, and folks are not following up on it. But I will continue to, and I'm not vouching for Vouch. Josh was quick with the text. These white supremacists. Be careful for even remotely platforming him. Listen, dude has hundreds of thousands of viewers and subscribers. He's not benefiting from me. And my only point is I watched it as I would watch anything else coming from white supremacists, and sometimes the methodology is sound. So that's it. That's all I'm saying. My bad. I don't mean to. But oddly, the white supremacist was defending Dave. I don't know for and offering inaccurate class analysis in the process. So so there's another contradiction that we all got to deal with. Anyway, someone who I know is much more of an expert in terms of dealing with contradictions, Freddie Foreshadowing, is going to join us here in a quick second and talk with us a little bit about his work on Kwame Nkrumah, his experience with Kwame Ture, his work in the AAPRP, and then we're going to come back to and build on the theme he's extending here this morning, allowing us to look at ultimately what I'm building to, the Black Liberation Army and the class struggle. So don't go anywhere. Much more coming up right here, and I mix what I like.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Whoops. All right, everybody. So joining us here this morning, and I'm very happy that this is happening. And again, big shout out to Josh and Aaliyah for helping us put the show together. But coming up this morning is Brother Michael Williams, Dr. Michael Williams. Sorry. Who, among many other things, is chair of the Aya Center, a single-purpose multi-service organization located in Accra, Ghana. The Aya Center is designed to enhance the learning experience and cultural awareness of international students, faculty, and travelers visiting Ghana. He has also served as Director of Africana Studies and the Dean of International Programs at the African University College of Communications, located in Accra, and he is also a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. His most recent book, The Pan-African Imperative, Revisiting Kwame Nkrumah's Vision for African Development, was published by Routledge in 2021, and about which we are going to talk a little bit about this morning. Welcome, Dr. Williams, to the program. It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Greetings.
Well, thank you very much for the invite, Dr. Ball. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the work you've been doing. And so it's a pleasure to be here.
No, again, the honor is mine. And so, if we could, let's start with that last point there about your new book. Unfortunately, I have not had a chance to read it yet, but I'm very interested in your thoughts on Dr. Nkrumah and the Pan-African imperative, especially in 2022, when it sometimes feels like that imperative has been lost on many in the diaspora. So if you would just take a few minutes and outline for us what you're saying here and what we need to take away from when we eventually all get and read your book.
Great. Well, I think this is an effort on my part to say that Nkrumah is still very much relevant. And I think a lot of people know that, especially a lot of young people who we really want to reach, but they haven't really read Nkrumah. And it's difficult. Nkrumah wrote 15 books. They're about 5 speeches of his. So how do where do you begin? And most students in Africa, outside of Africa, they haven't had a chance to read Nkrumah. So this was an effort on my part to condense what Nkrumah said about Africa. And it's still very relevant because Africa, as most of us know, suffers from neocolonialism. And the only way, not one of the ways, the only way to rid Africa of neocolonialism and to liberate the continent is for it to unite. That the division of Africa was artificial and it was created purposely to create dependencies. And that's what we have, just 55 dependencies. And so Nkrumah's analysis is, again, I think, correct, and it's an imperative because we can't go further. We can't develop. We can't feed, clothe, shelter ourselves. We can't solve our problems unless we unite. But it's not just unity. It's also socialism, which resolves the class issue that you've been raising so much. I guess the final thing I'll say by way of just introduction is that it's one thing uniting the continent, and I think almost anyone would agree that it would bring tremendous wealth because Africa has all these gold, diamond, bauxite, oil, uranium, zinc, cobalt, chrome, coltan, you name it, we have it. And so it can become very wealthy, but if we don't bring socialism, we'll just create an incubator for the unbridled accumulation of wealth for a small percentage of the population. And we don't want that. So we will need this wealth to be distributed to the masses of the people in education, healthcare, roads, and all the other problems we have. So it's unity and it's socialism, but it's what Nkrumah and others, Sekou Ture and so many others talked about is what that book is about.
So we've had a number of debates, as I'm sure you've had over the years, on this platform with some of my favorite people and comrades as well on how correct or not Nkrumah was in his analysis and the application of his ideas and in connection with the culture of the people and the argument over the imposition of a Eurocentric concept of socialism. How does your book address any of those concerns, and if so, how? And what is your argument or suggestion when considering Nkrumah and socialism and African people?
Yeah, I deal with it. There's a chapter I think 4, looks at class exploitation and socialist reconstruction. And mind you, it's a summary of the main ideas, but it's a summary, but as applied to the current conditions. And so I think the way to understand that is that socialism has to take its policies, programs, projects from the people themselves, from their culture, from their history, from their experience. And so socialism doesn't belong to any body. It's a universal scientific principle. It's just that the wealth that is created by the people must go to the people. That's the basic principle, that the resources, the mineral resources, and the fruit of people's labor must go to them. So that's just universal. But how you approach it, the projects, the programs, the policies, has to reflect the concrete conditions, history, culture of the people. And so that's there, and Nkrumah talked about it, and that's how it's done. People just try to bring confusion by saying it's Eurocentric, or it's from Europe, or it's from Marx. No, it's from just being human and making sure that the wealth of land, labor goes to the people, education, healthcare, and all the quality of life indices that nations are faced with.
So, but don't we have pan-africanism in? Well, no. I mean, you've already answered. I was going to make the sort of the sarcastic, the ironic question of, don't we already have pan-africanism in the African Union, but clearly by the definition of the AAPRP and Nkrumah and even just what you've outlined, there is no scientific socialism there. And it's sort of, but anyway, what I do want to ask, just, because I don't hear enough about it. I don't follow it enough. What is the latest with the AU, and how is it a reflection or response to reflection of or response to the OAU as it was originally created or envisioned by Nkrumah?
Well, it's just like the OAU is just weak. It just limps along. It doesn't have the resources. It's funding. Over 70% of its funding comes from outside, from the EU, from the UN, World Bank. And individual donors. So how can you really serve your people if you fund it from outside. So it lacks funding, it lacks central authority. When we have one crisis after another, the AU can't really do anything. And even some of its funding that it receives, it's not even used by the AU. The EU provides military funding for factions that it considers most appropriate, because the AU doesn't have that central authority to do anything. So I think it's better than nothing. I won't say it's useless, but the major problems that we have are continental, and the AU doesn't approach it that way. It doesn't have a military force. So structurally, it's just weak and doesn't have the resources to solve our problems. And moreover, it's led by men and women whose class interests are quite different from the masses of the people. So they don't feel compelled even to try to make pan-Africanism a reality. They don't feel compelled. They're comfortable. And like a farmer or market woman who could benefit immeasurably from pan-Africanism, these guys and gals, they just kind of, Africa's leadership, that's a whole nother, you maybe have had something on that. That itself is
not enough. I haven't done enough. Certainly, I know others on our platform have, particularly probably Jackie Lukman, Kalanji has done, I think, better than I have on that subject. But certainly, feel free to elaborate if you like.
Well, I would just make this point: is related and unrelated. Football. I don't know if you follow the African Cup of Nations and Africa.
I do. Now, thank you, sir. Now, that's what I'm talking about, because a lot of people on this platform hate on me because that's the only sport I do follow to a certain extent. So yeah. I did follow that a little bit. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Ghana and some other countries, we have a foreign coach. We have a coach. He's not from Ghana or Africa. He can't even speak the language. So how can I follow? What kind of leader can I follow if he doesn't think that we can go from our own people to select a football coach to coach and they've been doing it for so many years now. It's not just Ghana. So it's very shameful. I mean, if I can't select a coach from Ghana, why should I even select leaders from Africa? If the coach got to come from somewhere else, maybe the leaders should come from somewhere else too. I mean, so what does it say to children that, something that matters so important to us, we got to go outside and find somebody? And then they never win. And the only victories Ghana has ever won in Africa has been from an African Ghanaian coach. Nkrumah.
So did Senegal win? Senegal had a Senegalese coach, right?
Yeah,
the legendary.
Sure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they just won. Shout out to Sadio Mane.
Thank God.
But just to be fair, I do feel compelled to say that. I think I'm not disagreeing with you, but throughout the international football community, there are a number of countries that have so-called foreign coaches coaching their teams. Now, I think in the African context or the Ghanaian context, you're probably right, but I'm just saying it does happen. The United States had a German, but they did reject. The U.S. hired a lesser coach that was an American because they didn't want a Spanish-speaking, I believe, was he Mexican, the dude? But he was a better coach. But anyway, anyway.
Yeah, we just do it routinely as if no African should apply. No African should be allowed. And I imagine that German coach could at least speak English.
No, he does. Klinsmann, yeah, he speaks English. You're right.
Translate.
Listen,
but that's a whole nother, yeah.
Listen, real quick, because I do want to ask you about. Obviously, you could say more about your book, but I did also want to ask you about the reflection you've published on knowing Kwame Ture before we wrap. But we do have this question here from Leah Boggs, if I'm understanding it. What is the everyday Ghanaian's engagement with Nkrumah today like? If I understand, Leah, your question.
It's better. It's much better. Nkrumah has been It's a new appreciation for Nkrumah. I mean, you see it amongst the youth. There's some organizations that it's one called I think it's Economic Freedoms Fighter, or Economic Freedoms League. They're pure Nkrumahs. So yeah, he's being seen in a different light now. Thank goodness. So it's difficult even for his detractors, even for people who are anti-Nkrumah, to say anything against Nkrumah. I was at a meeting yesterday, and you could just see it. Yeah, so that's wonderful. Whereas before, people could just openly and just spread so many lies about Nkrumah with impunity. But now you'll find it very difficult for people to say that Nkrumah did something that he didn't do.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk. Look, because again, and we'll definitely, hopefully at least, do more of this. Have you back again, especially after I get a chance to actually read your book. But you've also talked about your having met or known worked with Kwame Ture. I never had a chance to meet him. I've read a lot. Probably wanted to join the AAPRP because of him. Quote him all the time. What would you want us to know about Kwame Ture as maybe he's mentioned during Black History Month in some cases, as Stokely Carmichael here and there, but
yeah,
what do we need to know?
Well, he was just a phenomenal person. He's 100% committed to the freedom of African people. And so when I met him, I was kind of in awe of him, but he was just constantly teaching all the time. I mean, from small things to big things. There's so many stories I could share. And he would come to the house. He stayed at the house. He knew the kids. So he, it's not more than just a charisma. Because of he had so much experience on the front line with white racism, institutionalized racism. It gave him a certain fortitude. He was fearless. That's one of the things that I really appreciated. He was just fearless. I'll give you just one small example. I was teaching at SUNY Binghamton, State University of New York in Binghamton, which is a citadel of kind of anti-Zionist activities. It was a strong Zionist community. And so they had this guy coming to speak. I forget, he's dead now, a very rabid Zionist mayor. I forgot his name.
Kahane?
Anyway, yeah, that guy. Yeah, he spoke. And so we said, no, we want Kwame Ture. And so it was just so much activity, anti-Kwame.
Yeah, they had Kahane speak there.
Oh yeah.
That's gangster.
A strong Zionist, yeah. And so Kwame.
Yeah, dude was violent. Dude was like militant with it. Like they always talk about no violence on campus. That's deep.
Right. Yeah. And so Kwame came there, and I mean, we were all nervous because was somebody gonna be shot, killed? And so this was in the 80s, I think. Yeah, in the 80s. And
would have had to be, because
he came up in there so calm and cool and collected, and the whole thing was just kind of funny to him because Kwame read a book, and I believe it, on Zionism every month. One book. I mean, he knew Zionism so well, and so he gave a dynamic speech. And then afterwards, during the question and answer, just seeing him destroy these young guys who really didn't know anything was just something to see. But the book that you mentioned, I dedicated to Kwame. So let me it's real quick. Dedicated to Kwame Ture, pan-Africanist par excellence, whose interpretation of Nkrumahism during the last quarter of the 20th century, in theory and in practice, remains the gold standard all revolutionary pan-Africanists should aspire to emulate. So yeah, just an undergrad. He came to my undergrad, UMS, Maryland Eastern Shore. Him and his partner Willie Mukasa Ricks, and I've just never been the same. He just shed so much light. He was brilliant. He was very smart, and just committed, dedicated.
Wait a minute, you were out here in Maryland? You were out here in Maryland?
Yeah. I grew up in DC, but I went to school in Princess Anne, Maryland. Yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't. Yeah, that's what's up. Okay.
Yeah, you at Morgan State. Yeah.
I'm at Morgan State, but I was also born in DC. Went to school all throughout Maryland. Been out to the Eastern Shore. All that stuff. So that's anyway. That's good to know. Good to find out.
Yeah. So he came there,
Right on.
and it was amazing. Yeah.
Well, look, Dr. Williams, I appreciate you coming through. I cannot wait to get the book and read it and have you back again. Please feel free to stay in touch and check us. We may have to have you. Somebody suggested it. We may have to see if we can set up a friendly, loving debate with our dear brother Kwesi Konadu, who has who disagrees on Nkrumah. Yeah, and felt that Nkrumah didn't appreciate the traditional cultures enough, and made some mistakes. So
sure.
Yeah. So we you know, these are if there's going to be debates, these are my favorite ones to have. So that would be you know, maybe we'll look into that. But anyway, Dr. Williams, thank you very much. I really, again, appreciate you coming through. Appreciate all the work, and I'm happy to be a comrade in an AAPRP as well. So look forward to more.
Thank you so much. I'm most grateful. Take care now.
Anytime. You too. All right, everybody. Big thanks to Dr. Williams. Appreciate that. And we will have to have him back and get to his book. And you know, maybe do this thing with Dr. Konadu. That would be kind of dope. Anyway, let me proceed on here. Got a little bit more to get to as we continue, because even that discussion with Dr. Williams was you know, Freddie foreshadowing. Anyway, quick break. Come right back. I mix what I like.
What I like.
All right, so still in the theme, and we're just about there. One more step. So you've all heard me mention already a number of times, maybe too much, possibly, that is the interview the interview denial rejection series here on A Mix What I Like. We did a couple years ago. Dr. Reed has been on with me a few times, been on the program a number of times, a couple times over the years, at least, going back to radio, etc. And he's been on this platform a couple years ago in a critical discussion where I guess we did have an overlap, was in a critique of Black Lives Matter. But this article was just sent to me the other day. That was a reprint from the New Yorker by Benjamin Wallace Wells. But I think is fascinating. I thought it was actually a fascinating article and does some to answer some of the questions that we raised here about, you know, what is, you know, Professor Reed's situation, like how does he situate himself rather, and why maybe he would or would be less willing to come on here, et cetera, and so forth. So I just want to go through a little bit of this because, again, I promise you, this is all foreshadowing. So anyway, as it says here, within the world of racial politics, Adolph Reed is the great modern denouncer. His day job for 40 years was a political scientist. He is now emeritus at University of Pennsylvania. But by night, he has maintained a long-term position, too, as a left-wing lambaster of figures he believes are selling some vision of race for political expediency or profit. And this is where I admitted the other day with Kim that this is where one of my bias or blind spots may be, because historically, as is mentioned here, he has called out people like Barack Obama as a vacuous opportunist, and scholars like Bell Hooks. I'm less interested in the critique of Bell Hooks, although she you know, rest in peace, you know, critiquable, of course. But for me personally, and called Michael Eric Dyson a little more, described him and others as little more than hustlers, blending bombast, cliches, psychobabble, and lame guilt tripping in service to the pay me principle, end quote. I like that hate. I like that hate, especially when directed at Dyson. No doubt about it. But we can't let our biases and blind spots take us over, right? So even you know, like his friend and ally Barbara Fields, a professor of history at Columbia University and the author of Racecraft, Reed tends to look skeptically on diversity programs or campaigns for reparations, which he believes redirect political energies for change into symbolic efforts that help just a few powerful Black people. Again, if we caption that, I'm right there. Again, I fully agree that there are class issues that have to be dealt with within the community that are often suppressed, that are not properly addressed. I'm on board with that. But ... So again, when he's critical, that is Reed of Ibram Kendi, I mean, I can't be mad at that. When he's critical of Isabel Wilkerson, Ta-Nehisi Coates, no disrespect to Baba Paul, and Henry Louis Gates, I can't be mad at that. Like I'm on board. Like they are hustling, they are abusing the history, the anti-Black, white supremacist, racist history suffered by African people. They are abusing that. I'm no doubt they are hustlers, etc., so forth, etc., etc. When Reed's, as is quoted here, Reed told me, that is the author here, quote, and I was struck by how many of them were so convinced that the whole purpose of the civil rights movement, talking about his Yale cohort, was that people like them could go to Ivy League colleges and go to Wall Street afterward. How many of them were just positively convinced that rich people are smarter than the rest of us? And I agree, all of that. It was the same perspective Reed went on that suggested that more Oscars for Ava DuVernay is like a victory for the civil rights movement and not just for Ava DuVernay and her agent. I agree, all of that. Cornel West was at times Reed's targets. We got into that when Cornel West was on a platform with us. Brother Adolph has three, as an ally told me, Brother Adolph has three deep hatreds. He hates the ugly consequences of predatory capitalist processes, and he hates the neoliberal rationalization for those predatory capitalist processes, and he hates the use of race as a construct that promotes the neoliberal rationalization of predatory capitalist processes. A trinity of hatreds. You could almost put that as an epitaph on his grave, end quote. Again, you could put that on mine. Oh, I'm not going to have a tombstone. These fools are not going to get my money for that nonsense. But anyway, theoretically, figuratively speaking, again, I agree with that. But that can't be the end of it. They talk a little bit in this article, something I didn't know about. I'm totally unfamiliar. There's a whole world that I need to get more familiar with. So I hope, I'm going to send this as a shout out to Josh and Aaliyah, and maybe they can help us with this, because I'm not at all familiar with, or enough, I shouldn't say at all familiar, but enough connected with this Black socialist world that, oh no, this is the democratic socialist, so I wouldn't be down with that. I'm good with that. Never mind. But no, these Afro socialists, I don't know this group at all. The DSA's Afro Socialists and Socialists of Color Caucus. Okay, never mind. I get it. My bad. I even my own highlights, I didn't read carefully enough. So no disrespect to them. I'm not interested in the DSA so much. So I wouldn't be. Okay. But on the morning of an event with the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, recently, apparently, the Afro Socialist and Socialists of Color Caucus formally demanded that the New York City chapter unendorse and remove all promotion for the event, or that it be turned into a debate over Reed's class reductionism. Now that I would agree with them, though. So this is why I was, oh man, it's so, there's so many nuances and whatever, et cetera, and so forth. Like I don't agree with the DSA, but I do overall, but I do agree that Reed is often engaged in class reductionism. So as I agree that we don't do enough class, we can't be class reductionists either. So now again, the book that I was struggling to summarize the other day with Kim on the morning show, that I was looking forward to having the discussion with Reed on. This article does a great job. Obviously this is, I don't know, we don't agree politically, but this is good journalism. This is good writing. This is a good summary of the work, and actually speaks to the concerns that I had, and I would have wanted to bring these questions to him. But anyway, the book read to me as a memoir, a term that Reed adamantly rejects. He told me my interest in the book made him regret writing it. He did not want to receive mainstream attention for his reminiscences. That's interesting. Then why would you grant a discussion with this guy? And why would you go on all of these prominent and mostly white outlets if you didn't want mainstream attention for your reminiscences? That's confusing. But the argument in the book is both pointed and characteristic of Reed. By assembling the quotidian details of his early life, Reed suggests that the everyday experience of Jim Crow was defined by the formal racial apartheid regime, but that class and simple contingency played large roles too. There is an unacknowledged offensive action here. In returning to the material of his childhood, Reed also engages a central history for many anti-racist writers, Jim Crow. He is in his own childhood, but on their turf. Then they talk about how, and this is also very interesting and maybe speaks to, some of where Reed concludes, that he talks about this Creole New Orleans upbringing, in urban settings in the South where racial categories tended to be more fluid. In his neighborhood, he writes, there was a duplex in which both units were occupied by branches of the same family bearing the same surname, one of which lived as Black and the other as white. I think that's fascinating. When he writes of white supremacy in the South, he puts it in the past tense. White supremacy was for as much. This is the point that I was trying to summarize. I just didn't say it nearly as well as what this author is how the author is bringing it out here. White supremacy was as much a cover story for, as he later puts it, a specific order of political and economic power as a concrete program. So that. But the point is that he talks about white supremacy as a past tense, something that has gone away, is not immutable, has changed, as this author says, has its own contingencies, specificities of when it's applied, et cetera, and so forth. And that to say that it's immutable and transferable from one period to the next is a mistake. So Reed is quoted as saying, this won't come as a surprise, but one thing that was on my mind was the 1619 project. I mean, nothing has changed line is one I have found bemusing and exasperating. And so you get to say that the murder of Trayvon Martin or of George Floyd is the same as Emmett Till or of the slave patrols, Reed told me. I don't like the frame. Oh man, people, this is just... I don't like the frame of declining significance of race narrative. I didn't like it in the 1970s, and I don't like it now, right? But racism is less and less capable of explaining manifest inequalities between blacks and whites. Liberals, he said, wanted it both ways. It's a common refrain. I know race is a social construction, but, Reed said, well, there is no but. It is either a unicorn or it's not a fucking unicorn, end quote. So I thought I had made a note to myself. Yeah. But isn't class a social construct? I'm actually asking all of you this because maybe I have this. Because when Reed is denouncing race as a social construct or denouncing it being defined as a social construction, but then being described as immutable. In other words, as I'm understanding what Reed is saying, he's saying if it's a social construct, it is something that can be changed. It's just social construct. So why do you keep saying it hasn't changed? But then I'm asking, isn't class a social construct, or is one said to have more material impact than the other? Or am I misunderstanding the Marxist definition of construct or social or both? Because I thought classes were also social constructs, and yet they seem to have an immutability from the perspective of Reed and other class reductionists, that any other social construct could then be said to have. So in other words, why is class more or less a social construct or more or less immutable than race? Right. That's what I thought. Right. That's also what I thought. Okay. All right. But so right, but so there is no Marxist line that I've missed that Reed is borrowing from that says that there's that would explain how he or others would say that the social construct of class is somehow more immutable than that of race, right? I don't know. I got to keep learning. I got to keep working it through it. I don't know. Maybe I'm not even clear. But anyway. For his Zoom background, that is, Reed had chosen a diagram of a mounting tsunami, which he said represented his fears of an imminent surge of authoritarianism and a retreat of American democracy. Some things that Reed said struck me, and I don't know why that can't be, I don't know why that, anyway. Some things, why would the coming, right, I mean, but again, George Jackson said that fascism was already here, democracy already doesn't exist, and did not seem to reduce his class analysis to an absence of a racial or colonial one. So I don't know. Some of the things Reed struck me surprisingly bleak, coming so soon after the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign. I had imagined that Reed might take some comfort in the swelling young membership of the DSA, but instead dismissed it, comparing it to the late period Students for Democratic Society, full of political naifs, and noting that socialism was a somewhat vaporous concept at this point anyway. Now, by the way, that was an argument I was making about Bernie Sanders, who Reed supported. So I would have loved to ask him about this too. My argument for not supporting Adolph Reed and not signing that big letter that Barbara Ransby and others had put out, and not, the reason, again, nobody cares that I did this. So I don't mean to make this over important, other than to say, just acknowledge that I was right. I am claiming credit. I was right. But this was the argument I was making, that I thought Bernie Sanders' campaign and presence and popularity was doing more to confuse the issue of socialism than promote it. That he did more to liberalize it and make it harder to adapt or recognize or understand, and made it more vaporous. Anyway, to illustrate how far the left is from power, Reed said something I'd heard him say before. The most significant, this was interesting. The most significant left force in the Biden administration on the domestic policy is the asset managers of BlackRock, and on the foreign policy, it's John Mersheimer and foreign affairs crowd. Reed did not mention that these developments, that his ideological enemies in his administration were pushing large amounts of social spending in the domestic sphere and retreat from forever war overseas, might count from another perspective as a left-wing victory. I thought this was interesting, and I don't fully understand it. The most significant left force in the Biden administration on domestic policy is the asset managers of BlackRock. So is he saying that BlackRock is running his foreign policy? I would agree with that. John Mersheimer is the Israeli lobby. He and his partner wrote that book. His colleague wrote that book on the Israeli lobby, basically controlling American foreign policy. I didn't read the book. I just saw them in an interview and read, I think, one or another article about their book. So I might, forgive me if I didn't describe that perfectly accurately, but their point is about the Israeli lobby influence. So is he saying that's, so if that's true, okay, I agree with that. I don't see, first of all, I don't see that they've ended a forever war. They just redirected it. So I think I agree with Reed on that anyway. But to me, that's not a sign of an immutable anti-Blackness. That is something else, which is where we will now get to the culminating point, as I'm trying to argue and build this morning. So let's do that right now.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
All right, everybody. So I put in the I should have done this the last time we worked from this document, but I put in the show notes a link to where everyone can download this document that I got working with the good folks in an AAPRP work study circle coming out of Germany. Shout out to them, to the Maji Circle. But I wanted to come back to it because, as I've often been self-critical, haven't, as much as I talk about political prisoners and as many times I've interviewed Dhoruba, I don't think I've worked enough directly with their ideas. And which is a huge contradiction, given that one of my biggest pet peeves and arguments has been the way that radical figures like Malcolm, Martin, the Panthers, etc., are constantly discussed absent their ideas. So in an attempt to rectify that, I've been trying to, work through some stories I wanted to build from this morning. Oh my God, I completely forgot one. So I got to go back. So I'm sorry. I got to go back and do one more before I get to this other one. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. So as my bad, everybody. Please forgive me. So following from what Reed was saying about the pessimism he sees in Biden's administration, which I think I and many of us would have seen as predictable. It was mentioned recently that this Friday, it's this Friday, I'm supposed to be debating Dr. Carr on Kalanji's Riot Starter Show. Friday, I think at 8 o'clock. It's so late. About voting. And, I know it emanates from my criticism of all of this positive, emphasis and discussion on Black women or any Black people being nominated by Biden to the Supreme Court. Well, he also nominated recently another Black woman to the board of directors of the Federal Reserve, Dr. Lisa D. Cook. And I wanted to look into her. I was curious just to look into her work a little bit. She's a professor of economics and international relations at Michigan State University. And obviously the right and the conservatives are already condemning her as, I've seen one article described her as a woke economist and all this other kind of stuff. So I wanted to just see how woke is she, and what kind of economist is being picked up here. And also, by the way, because I've also been asking for and looking for help finding Black women economists of a certain political stripe, so to speak, that could be regular contributors to this platform. And one of the, and I've been hesitant in sharing this because I know it sounds like that patriarchal cliche when I say I can't find any or many. And then the amount of Black women economists who are quote unquote trained economists, but have the political stripe that would be, I think, welcomed by me on this show or this platform. And then who would, in addition to that, be willing to come on. That is at this point so far, a non-existent number. So I'm happy to be checked on that. I want help in that. So please. But one of the reasons for that was answered in a clip that I found from Dr. Cook herself. And I'm not sure if we're going to hear it, so I'm just going to read the quote here, that less than 0.5% of top economic papers addressed race or ethnicity. Oh no, I'm sorry. That she was talking about that's not the percentage. Anyway, sorry, wrong stat. But she did say that less than 0.5% of top economics papers address race or ethnicity. She's talks a lot about a lot of her argument. In fact, as she says here, So there's just got to be a broader thinking about who can contribute. That's the whole point of my research, end quote. A large part of her work, a large body of a large component of her work is about arguing in different ways that there needs to be more inclusivity into the field of economic study, and related areas, like in the field of patents and others, to help expand the economy, improve the economy, and make the world better. So as I wrote here, she's solid left of center, but will be marginalized, as is I think, even if she's selected, I think she'll be marginalized, as was, I think, Derek Hamilton, if she's brought into the administration. And that, yeah, her basic message, more inclusion, will help the economy. And then she has talked about, okay, so there's a clip. Okay, I did want to play this one clip. It's an audio clip, but I think it speaks, it's not long, and it speaks to the points I'm trying to get at here about where these folks are positioned and why we get so many of the analyses that we do get. Let me pull this forward here to get it set up real quick. Yeah, I did. Yeah, okay. Let's see. Broader think about who could contribute. Salt Lake Center and Lisa Cook. So when I let's see, when I look here, I did look at her. So and this is not, I'm not hating. She doesn't, I think it's interesting. She's not published any books, but has a lot of articles and addresses published. A lot of those of us in the academic world would find this interesting. A lot of co-authored pieces, but a substantial body of work. And a lot of it is the extent to which I could get these articles for free, and not all of them were available. They deal with, again, unleashing economic growth by basically arguing that, again, more inclusion, gender and racial disparities in the U.S. labor market are addressing gender and racial disparities in the U.S. labor market are essential to boosting wages and power innovation. So she's basically saying that racism hurts the country. It hurts us all. It's that again, it's not wrong. It's not necessarily, I mean, it's not revolutionary, but it's not conservative or reactionary stuff either. It's good, solid, liberal, left of center, mainstream economics work. And I think in the one or two pieces that I did read, in the interviews I read, I think the clip I'm going to play for you here, albeit audio, summarizes, not long, but it summarizes, I think, very well the position and the place in which she finds herself, and in which we ultimately find ourselves in terms of the kind of economic analyses that are promoted and that dominate the public policy around us. So let me just play this and you'll see.
Lisa, I'd like to talk about the Chicago School and its best known member, Milton Friedman. In his 1962 book, Capitalism and Freedom, Friedman argues that free market capitalism protects people from being, and I'm going to quote here, discriminated against in their economic activities for reasons that are irrelevant to their productivity. So if that's true, why hasn't the market pushed bigots out by showing that the most competitive firms don't discriminate for such irrelevant reasons?
Well, clearly that was a market failure when he was writing, and it's a market failure now. If there's a misallocation of talent, it comes from somewhere, and that's got to be discrimination and racism, systemic racism. And to tell you the truth, he surprised me even by reading my work carefully and giving me very detailed feedback. And it was even more surprising that he was very supportive of the work, that it was intuitive to him. So I think he might have seen how immediately violence can have an effect on innovation and on economic activity. So I think he could see how the pieces were being put together, that this wasn't using exotic models. I wasn't using exotic data. I was just putting those data sets and the analysis together in an unusual way. This was making the case that discrimination existed and violence existed.
Milton Friedman's ideas have obviously been hugely influential here in the United States, but they've also had a huge influence around the world. And they've certainly played a major role in shaping the so-called Washington Consensus. And that paradigm, which emerged from leading Western academic and
My bad. That'll actually do it. That was all I really wanted to play from that, but only to point out that this is so. And my point in saying that summarized her and a broader situation so well is that here's Milton Friedman, the dean, so to speak, of neoliberal economics, of promoting the idea that the United States could extend its imperial reach and dominate further by imposing draconian austerity, privatization principles and projects and demands on Latin America, Africa, everywhere that the United States engages economically. You know, I mean, I remember years ago reading Capitalism and Freedom, this idea that, well, again, that capitalism is freedom. So on the one hand, that this guy who coming out of the Chicago School of Economics, that itself produced so much of the conservative and right-wing, again, neoliberal approaches to economics and public policy, that she would seek him out, that he would support her work, that itself was saying there's too much racism and bias and discrimination that hurts innovation, that he would be seen as supporting her work, that, as she talks about elsewhere, still took her 10 years to publish. And I thought it was in that clip, but she somewhere else she was talking. Sorry about that. She was talking about the. Wait, is it in this one? Yeah, there was another article I was reading where she in a discussion she has regarding inequality and economic growth, but barriers to entering the field of invention have led to negative outcomes for individuals and for the economy. This is sort of anyway. That's the sort of the direction that, you know. But that apparently he could even recognize that, and as she said, you know, how did she describe it? It was a market flaw or a market. Anyway, it was a flaw in the market historically at the time of Milton Friedman, that there was not enough inclusion that would allow for more invention, innovation, and a boost to the economy. And that problem still exists today. It was a struggle for her to get that work published. Again, when you read her or hear her, when she's in, again, she's not, as she said in that clip, I wasn't using, what she's really saying was, I wasn't using radical analyses to reach my conclusions. I was using the same data all these mainstream economists use, and was just looking at it a little bit differently, that is, through the eyes of a Black woman, and realizing there are no Black people and women in these spaces, and it hurts the economy. So I'm not saying the capitalism is wrong. I'm not saying we need to If we could just be a little more inclusive, it would help everybody. Well, we know that there's room for that argument in the mainstream academic world, in economics, in Black studies, in media studies, in every field. If that is your approach, there's room for that. And that even maybe a Milton Friedman will be willing to hear it, because if the goal is ultimately to make the economy stronger, which means that those who own the economy like him will do better, then maybe we'll listen to a little bit. We'll let a few of you more of you in, or at least hear the argument. But then even with his support, she couldn't get the work published for a decade. So, but this is, anyway, so Biden found a qualified mainstream left of center Black woman economist who makes an argument that everyone is willing to hear and no one is willing to do anything about. Hence 50 years later. And then here we'll make this next segue, this final segue. Hence, many years later, despite what people like Adolph Reed and others say, there is this immutability of race that even when it could be seen as hurting the class interests of whites, we haven't collectively overcome that, or in the words of Dr. King, white people haven't psychologically organized themselves to be willing to deal with that. So, all right, now let's get to this last.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
So as I said, I want to continue to correct this problem of not building from the ideas of those we honor and pay tribute to. So let's do more of that. And I think, again, what I think is fascinating, and the point I've been trying to make about foreshadowing, is that so much of what we've talked about today, whether it's political prisoners, Dr. Cook, Kwame Nkrumah, Adolph Reed, Kwame Ture, so on and so on and so on. The intersection of or the overlap of racial and class oppression. I think with Dhoruba as the primary author of this document, as he said with us a few interviews ago, which I did not know until that moment, but it makes sense. I think this document stands up in almost every way, and certainly this section on class, I think, is extremely important given even just what we've talked about this morning. So, and for Black History Month is just never discussed, almost never discussed. So I put a link to, so everybody, if you don't already have this document, you can get it, you can read it with me, read it with us, you can correct my interpretation. I'm very happy to do that, and we're definitely going to come back to it. We've dealt with it previously. We're going to keep coming back to it, and every time I look at it, I love it even more. So it just starts off in this section on what I have as page 86. What constitutes and distinguishes classes is not primarily differences in income, mentality, or habits, as is vulgarly, I'm not saying that right, vulgarly supposed, but the places they occupy in social production and relations in which they stand to the means of production. This is what determined their differences in income, habit, mentality, and so on, and Cornforth historical materialism. Class is determined by one's relations to the means of production. As stated simply, this means class is determined by what one does for a living. It is important that we learn the general class differences of society, and that of what direction is the best interest of our people as a class as well as a race. For to be unconscious of the class factors is to wage race struggle rather than class struggle, and is to play directly into the hands of the exploiter. Quoting from Mao, who are our enemies? Who are our friends? This is a question that is first importance for the revolution. To assure that we will definitely achieve success in our revolution and not lead the masses astray, we must pay attention to uniting with our real friends in order to attack our real enemies. To distinguish real friends from real enemies, we must make a general analysis of the economic status of the various classes in Chinese society and of their respective attitudes towards the revolution. A class analysis is one of the basic tools necessary to develop a correct revolutionary strategy. Black people as a whole, 90%, fall into the class category of workers, proletariat, and as such, our best interest is the economic and political defeat of the monopoly capitalist class and the instituting of a workers' state. But because of our skin color, the bourgeoisie have found it convenient to set us aside for special oppression and super exploitation. At the same time, they have found it strategic to raise the quality of life of white workers and thereby enlist their aid and support of the capitalist system. So again, I don't want to make this entirely about because as I was reading this, it was easy for me to fall into making this all about a response to Reed, but and I don't want to do that. But this is what I think is really important among the many things that they do in this piece is the way they recognize both, as we were all discussing on our own just a moment ago, the overlap of class and race. You can't reduce one and leave out the other. And in this, United for a Fair Economy has kind of drawn down over the years the effort that they put into these reports, admittedly, but their annual State of the Dream reports relative to the where we were materially at the time of Dr. King's assassination. But in their most recent one, I just wanted to pull something up as a quick, supplement to what we're reading from this BLA piece. In terms of median household income, white income is 71,000, Latinx is 51,000, Black 41,000. And I did see a critique I got in the comments a couple of shows ago, or last show, where I kept I was being criticized for continuing to lump Black and brown together and saying Black and brown people, and not being sufficiently appreciative of the specifics of what happens to Black people. And that's not really what I mean, and to do. And I'm very well aware of the specifics of the particulars of the oppression suffered by Black people. But one of the reasons why I say Black and brown all the time is part of it is some of it is bad habit. I admit that, but some of it is also me attempting to not only unify falsely. My goal is to have some false unity, but not to unify falsely Black and brown communities, or to wash away the specifics of Black experience, but to note also that the Black experience transverses or transfers over into what is considered the brown community as well. That there is an Afro-Latin community. There is race within Latin American communities, and there is a pan-africanism that anyway. So that's usually what I think I'm. But to point out here, there is a difference specifically noted here, where Latinx is doing better in terms of income than are Black people. 4 times more likely trans people of color specifically, even notes here, trans people of color are 4 times more likely to be unemployed. 6 out of 10 Black and Latinx households would run out of savings in 3 months, as compared to 3 out of 10 for white, and 1 in 5 indigenous people are uninsured, as that graphic says there. The top 1% of wealthiest Americans own 40% of the wealth. Most of that is in the hands of whites, whose white wealth is significantly higher at 188,200 than Latinx at 36,100, and certainly more than Black people at 24,100. For every $1 of wealth owned by a single white man, a single white woman owns 54 cents, a single Black woman owns 1 cent, and a single Latinx woman owns less than 1 cent. So even across lines of gender, the line of race is pretty remains largely determinate. Okay, so just a quick supplement to the now 50-year-old claim, unfortunately still accurate, from the BLA document here, that 90% of Black people fall into what would be considered the proletariat or working community. As contradictions in world capitalism sharpen inflation and depression, competition of other capitalist countries and of socialist countries, the winning of independence of third world countries, and the growing trend towards socialism, etc., the bourgeoisie will no longer be able to shield the white worker from capitalist exploitation. The white worker may very well become radicalized and pursue his true interest as a worker via the worker state. Until then, now obviously this didn't happen. This didn't happen. So as they said then, and again, we would have to consider still relevant today. Until then, the Black and third world people must shoulder the task of socialist revolution and advance their own cause and thereby their cause of humanity. They go on to say that the U.S. can be divided into 5 basic classes: the bourgeoisie, the petty bourgeoisie, the proletariat, the peasants or small workers, and then the lumpen, who are so-called the bottom class. In class society, everyone lives as a member of a particular class, and every kind of thinking, without exception, is stamped with the brand of class, as Mao Zedong pointed out. So it's not only that we live within these classes, but our way of thinking is stamped without exception by that class. Now, that doesn't mean it's entirely determinant, but it is a stamp. I don't remember knowing this, so if I did, I certainly forgot it. So in reading this again, it's nice that the bourgeoisie, that Borg means town. Again, and specifically a fortified town. So the bourgeoisie, I think, or the ruling class, I think it works, should be seen as a fortified town, defending its class interests. The bourgeoisie or ruling class in that class of society who either own or control the major sectors of the economy. For example, the controllers of the top 500 companies listed in Fortune 500 magazine, the 50 families, or those of the $2 trillion a year gross national product. These few people control almost 1.8 trillion. These are the real capitalists and their lieutenants, and they are a relative few. To that end, I thought it would be interesting just to get a quick reminder of where we are today. Something I'm not entirely sure is appreciated well enough these days. But today, just the top 10 of that Fortune 500 include Walmart, Amazon, Apple, CVS Health, United Health Group. Them and McKesson are all, so 4, 5, and 7 are all health related. Obviously got a big boost during the pandemic. Berkshire Hathaway is Warren Buffett. Alphabet is the parent company of Google, and ExxonMobil is, who they are. So, we still have that same and worsening. And then something else that I always like to remind of as well in relationship to that, just as we, just look at the updated version. Because all of those companies, oh wait, that's not the one I wanted. That's not the one I wanted. We just looked at that. All of those companies work very well together politically to defend their fortified town. And they do that. Now, again, I keep arguing while they tell us to go get our small businesses and save our money and invest in crypto and whatever. The richest companies in the world all work together at the Business Roundtable to, as they say here, this is so disingenuous to have her pictured here because, I mean, that's just gangster fake PR. But as their goal, as they point out here, the Business Roundtable is an association of chief executive officers of America's leading companies working to promote a thriving U.S. economy and expanded opportunity for all Americans through sound public policy. Public policy. Public policy. So, when we're talking about the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world, General Motors, Kaiser Permanente, Best Buy, Honeywell, Bechtel, Walgreens, Apple, Land O'Lakes, JP Morgan Chase, this guy, the one who took a knee in front of his vaults after George Floyd, Duke Energy, Union Pacific Railroad, Citi, Visa, United Airlines, Cisco, Walmart, PayPal, American Express. These are just a handful. When they get together, They get together in unity to influence public policy. They don't get together to talk about investing in a small business and getting their savings right. They get together to make sure that the apparatus of government leans and works in their favor. Tariffs, tax breaks, protections from oversight, whatever. I don't even know everything, obviously. But they're not getting together to talk about, let's circulate our dollar. Anyway, that's who they are. That's just a little bit. Then they get into a little bit of the racial dynamic of, which I thought was interesting in light of our recent discussions around Whoopi Goldberg. And more or less, the argument is that the real power brokers are white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who allow a few Jews, Catholics, and Italians into the mix. But they make a point that I was glad to read here because it's a better version of something I've been trying to say for a long time. That leads to still so much confusion today as to how we understand the racializing of those in power. But oftentimes, because we in the Black community have more direct contact with the rich Jewish landlord, merchant, or media executive, the rich Irish politician, the rich Italian businessman with the mafia connections, background, etc., we tend to be easily convinced that rich Jews run the entire country, or rich Irish or mafia runs the entire country. And I think that's actually correct. I mean, so obviously, because particularly the circumstance of Jews being kept out of the dominant sectors of manufacturing, for instance, and even for a long time, elite education, which is why you have universities like Brandeis and others that were developed to give Jews an elite education that they couldn't get at Harvard, et cetera. They went into, but because of the other avenues available to them through expansion of whiteness, et cetera, and so forth, and cavernous differences in history, et cetera, and so forth, they were able to get into other areas like media, land acquisition or rental property acquisition, and then interact more immediately with Black communities. So the first oppressor that Black people would often see would be a Jew, an Irish, or an Italian. The ruling class is so much more capital than any Black group that they can afford to let a Black capitalist group build up a certain amount of capital, industry, land, and businesses until the Blacks have invested all their money, then break them up overnight as easily as one breaks a matchstick. And then I wrote right there, crypto, baby. Crypto. So again, it's not that the ruling class is monolithic. It's not that they should, it's not that from the perspective of Black folks, it's not, I'm not saying it's illogical for Black people to say they're all white and they're all the same, but from their perspective, that's not the case. There is a WASP influence and dominance. Black people collectively, even those who are afforded some level of Black bourgeoisie access, do not have enough money, even when attempting to pool resources to compete with white folks. So this idea it's particularly the WASPs. So this idea that we have to get our money right, build ourselves up, and then we can get our political power is part of the mythology that I keep arguing about, and that Dhoruba and the BLA have clarified 50 years ago. The ruling class has so much more capital than any Black group that they can afford to let any Black capitalist group build up a certain amount of capital, industry, land, and businesses until the Blacks have invested all their money, then break them overnight as easily as one breaks a matchstick. So if you think Black people are going to listen to the crypto-gandists and go invest all their money and buy up all this digital land and all these digital assets, and then somehow that's going to solve the problem, this is why the analyses of these folks has to be constantly brought back into our own. And I have been woeful in my own, participation in that. So, because look at that. I mean, this is anyway. That's the whole MOBP argument right there. Since many white ruling class, and then the issue of gender. Very interesting statement here. Since many white ruling class females hold title, wait, does that say hold? Since many white ruling class females hold titles to the wealth. What is that word? Anyway, since many white ruling class females something titles to the wealth and turn it over to male administrators, it's obvious that ruling class females wholeheartedly condone and advocate the policies of the ruling class males. Thus, the overriding concern of the ruling class is not a matter of white male supremacy or white female supremacy, but primarily white ruling class supremacy. So is there an encouraged overemphasis on any particular identity that encourages us to be unaware or less aware of white ruling class supremacy? Anyway, they go on talk about the lieutenant sector, the petty bourgeoisie, the middle class, who manage this, that, and the third. The proletariat, which means urban worker. This keeps workers enslaved through wages since he has nothing to sell but his labor. Racism is the primary tool it uses to give extra benefits to white workers and to whites in general at the expense of super exploitation and oppression of Black and third world people. So going back even to the data sets I just showed in over simplification and summary, the same thing. And in contradiction of Adolph Reed and others' points, this tool, so again, however it's described, this tool is used over and over and over and over again. And to this day, with great and even greater effect than it was being used 50 years ago to hide the overall existence of a white ruling class and how that ruling class sustains itself by divvying up with greater emphasis on Black and brown people and indigenous people the lion's share of the suffering, so that it alleviates enough from their fellow whites to allow that broader white community to become a buffer against any real change. I just think, I mean, farm workers, migrant workers are predominantly Black and third world and possessing. And by the way, this also answers the question, the critique I got as to why I keep saying Black and brown people. So even as the BLA, the Black Liberation Army, is clear of the specifics of the issues facing Black people, part of understanding the specific condition of Black people is to understand how others in this sort of broader web of imperialism are being impacted as well. I think it is important that they note here that farm workers, as part of an analysis to understand the condition, we have to note where others are placed within this situation. Farm workers, migrant workers are predominantly Black and third world and possess inherent potential that could assist rural guerrilla warfare. Service workers, house workers, and another category that is predominantly Black and third world and also predominantly women, this category has an inherent potential that could definitely assist urban guerrilla warfare. One thing I like about this, as I am not advocating urban guerrilla warfare, but one thing I like about what they've done here is that, again, to the point I was trying to, struggle to make a minute ago, there is a tactical application to noting the place in all of this of other communities. So it's not just the constant refrain that we are encouraged by more conservative elements within the Black community to keep coming back to. Black people have it worse. Black people need specific attention. Black only, black only, black only. This tactically is flawed, as we're reading right here. It's not an issue of not recognizing differences or appreciating differences or having biases, but there's also a need to make an objective analysis, and then there's also a need to develop tactical responses that can't simply be black only, because note that all the groups that keep, or the more prominent groups that promote black only, black only, black only, have as a solution, their only solution appeals to a white government. By the way, I just watched, he's too conservative for me, but JT Pocket Watcher, the accountant, the brother accountant dude, who critiques a lot of the fakery and fake guru stuff online, did a thing about Umar Johnson, and he was talking about Polite also, but I don't know if he was but the point he was making was that, that Umar, for all of his pro-black and black this, black that, when it came to hiring a lawyer, or was it an accountant, to handle his nonprofit paperwork for the school he's trying to build, who didn't do it right, and then he hired a white dude, and then when they didn't do it right and filed the nonprofit taxation paperwork right or whatever, JT breaks it all down on his channel, the Pocket Watcher channel. He said, he hired a white dude, and I think Polite was the one he was talking about, who was selling his houses anyway, or was it Jay Morrison? One of them, who was talking about he's a housing dude, but when it comes time to selling property or buying property, he's got a white real estate agent. So my point is that a lot of these folks who talk about black only, black only, black only have a very, white directed or focused solution strategy, or involving, the only way out is through whites, oddly enough, for this. But in terms of but I also like what in terms, so I like that in terms of the black and brown that they say here, but also in terms of this question of gender, I really like how it's just seamlessly stated here that most of the domestic workers and service workers, who are not only black and brown, but primarily women, also just automatically themselves, without any discussion of gender roles, et cetera, could equally be part of a urban guerrilla warfare effort. Now, they talk a little bit about the lumpen here, and they talk about the importance of the lumpen. That is, as they describe here, lumpen literally means ragged, the most oppressed and materially suffering of the class structure. Fanon pointed out that in Wretched of the Earth, at the Algerian Revolution, the lumpen was in the vanguard. I think there's, I've been in a lot of circles where this has been debated, and some say that this was a mistake. I certainly don't see that today. I don't see the vanguard coming out of what we would consider the lumpen proletariat, unfortunately, and in part because so much of the propaganda, from my perspective, humbly, much of the propaganda and education they get is managed in such a way that encourages, again, for them to only see a solution to the problem, either the underground economy or the mainstream political economy, either, again, through voting for Democrats, or just the whoever corporate Democrat is thrown at them, or starting a business in some black capitalist endeavor. But as they point out here, it's a little more nuanced. So even though they're saying everybody is branded by their class position and every person is a member of a class, everyone is also an individual. So there is room for flexibility in this, and not everybody is going to have the exact same response or behavior in this, and that can provide opportunities and differences to be exploited for the good of the struggle. So anyway, that's it on that section. And really, what I wanted us to sort of conclude with, that that the BLA, as we've seen already and will continue to see, has offered a lot of the great analysis that we can build from. They've left us documents that we can study from. And even in this study guide, there are questions at the end of each section. I've only gone through a section of a section here today because I wanted to specifically talk a little bit about this issue of class in light of some of these other stories that I was looking at this week. And I love the way they deploy and blend a clear colonial, even race-first analysis to understand that, yes, there is a specific need and condition imposed on Black people, but Black people are part of a global humanity that is itself, in varying ways and degrees, experiencing these same negative forces of imperialism, colonization, et cetera, and imposition of class and class structures and capitalism. So I don't know. I just love the way they deal with it. And I wanted to read through some of this with you all and make sure that we, and I in particular, continue to incorporate this work in our own. It's clearly still needed. So anyway. Yeah, I'm not sure the entire context, but I generally agree with the comment here. I wasn't comparing Dr. Umar with Polite. I was saying that JT, the pocket watcher, was. And again, he's too conservative for me. He's just ultimately wanting people to work, with greater degrees of financial literacy within a capitalist system to do better. But I do appreciate that he calls out a lot of scammers, and he equates Umar with Polite. The charges against Polite notwithstanding, but just in terms of the economic analysis. Yeah, and I agree with that fundamentally, that lumpen have a major role in the imperial core, but I don't see them being organized politically or and with the requisite degrees of organization, consciousness, et cetera, to take that role. And I see them being, and that's one of the reasons why I appreciate even JT, the pocket watcher's work, to a point that at its base, he's just trying to stop Black people from being scammed by frauds. Okay, right on. No, yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh yeah. He calls out Boyce Watkins too. That is JT, and I agree. Boyce does the same thing. His analyses and selling people these courses. What is it, to millionaire something, to become a millionaire courses? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Who has truly befriended the Black man and woman when it doesn't benefit their cause? I'm not sure anybody has. But the point would be to recognize when the causes overlap and to not cut ourselves off from that. So I wouldn't ever have advocated that any African struggle reject the support of the Cuban Revolution because, Castro and Fidel and then Che weren't Afro-Cuban or Black. And I don't think Assad or Shakur would reject their support even when they recognize that the support is benefiting their cause. And that was sort of the point of the Cuban Revolution. They recognized that a free Africa, a free Latin America, a free Black America are all part of what would maintain their own freedom. So I don't know, nobody, I mean, so I'm not saying I'm not saying we should look for people to somehow support us when it's outside of their cause. What I'm saying is we should recognize when those causes overlap. And again, I don't even necessarily see in the work of the BLA document I was just working from, I don't see them calling for coalition. I see them recognizing as an analytical point the similar position of Black and brown people. So again, I might be reading some of these comments out of context, and I hope that I'm not being taken out of context. That I'm not advocating some blind, again, Jesse Jackson Rainbow Coalition thing. I'm saying a Fred Hampton Rainbow Coalition thing. I'm saying I don't think it's a contradiction to recognize one's own bias and particular history and working with others who have at moments overlaps in those histories and struggles who could benefit. So, and then again, as I keep saying, a lot of the all Black groups keep having as their only solution the white federal government. So who's going to give you the states in America that some have called for, if not the white federal government? Who's going to give you the space to engage in your Black capitalism, if not the white society and federal government? I mean, that's really what I mean. Anyway. Oh, somebody got blocked? Okay. Yeah, but I thought this was this boy's. Yeah, I think this was that's what they were talking about. That they use. No, I thought that was Jay Morrison that this happened to, though. I thought that was Jay Morrison, but they work together, so they're kind of the same in that respect. So, anyway, listen, everybody. I appreciate you all sticking around this long. A big thanks to Josh and Aaliyah for helping put the show together. A big thanks to Dr. Williams for coming through. A big thanks to all of you for coming through. Please continue to support the program and the channel. Click like, join, subscribe, and click the bell. Check out our new Discord. Check out the HBCU Not a Different World project at imixwhatilike.org. If you got suggested guests or want to come on the program, hit us up at imixwhatilike@gmail.com. For everything else, just continue to reach out to me directly. I get to as much as I can, and or like Pierre over at Comedy Hype says,
Put it in the comments.
And we'll catch you here next time. You got to love the program, right? Yeah. You can't disagree with Harper. And I appreciate you all sticking around so long today, and nobody seemed to doze off. Appreciate that. Yeah, we thought that was funny. I'm going to go get a latte too, man. Or maybe toast to you all. Shout out to everybody. Thanks for coming through. All right, everybody. Peace if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. And we'll catch you next time. Remix morning show tomorrow and all week. I'll be back on Friday. A whole lot has been coming up on the channel, so please go get caught up like I'm about to. And I'll see you next time here at I Mix What I Like. Thanks, everybody.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.